Hello and welcome back to the 15th episode of Greek Speaks. Wow. I apologize for the late arrival of the Dionysus video last week because it was so long. I had to get my email verified and I had to do some stuff that I didn't realize I needed to do, but it is up. So this week we talk about Aphrodite, who is the goddess of love and sexuality. So she's one of those gods that you either really hate or really love. If you can tell, I'm kind of on the hate side, but she is like Artemis is more associated with seasons of somebody's life. So she is very focused on adult, I'm using the term adult very loosely. She's focused more on adult women and their ideas of sexuality. So she has two parentages, actually, both given to us by contemporaries Homer and Hesiod. In Hesiod, she is the daughter of Uranus. If you don't remember from the third episode of Greek Speaks. If you don't remember, when Kronos overthrew Uranus, Kronos castrated Uranus, cut off his balls, and tossed the balls behind him into the ocean, and out popped Aphrodite, which I think has to be top 5 weirdest ways someone is born in mythology. Definitely up there. In Homer and in the Iliad, she is the daughter of Zeus and Dione, who's just this minor goddess who might just be Dione and the word Zeus. If you didn't know, in Greek, because of the way it's spelled, Zeus is, long story short, in some cases Zeus is called Zeus, and in other cases he's called Zedeu, which, because of the way Greek works, their Z is more of a combination of the sounds of S and D. So in other cases, he is more on the D side of that. So Dione might just be a female form of Zeus. She has offspring like Eros, who also has a very complicated birth story. The Erotes, which, if you can tell, is that where we get the word erotic from. Aeneas, who she has with Anchises, who's the founder of Rome, quote unquote, and hero of the Aeneid. He's also in the Iliad. And then she has a daughter called Pethio, which is the spirit of persuasion. She's married to Hephaestus, but she has a fling with Ares and, as you can tell, a lot of other people. Her attributes are birds mostly, doves in particular, and the Erotes, which are kind of just winged bird women. There's a lot of that in mythology. Winged bird women could describe 15 things. She has a couple cult titles. She has Limenia, which is of the harbor, because, again, she was born from the ocean, so there's a lot of ocean ideas with her. She has Pandemos, which is of the people, and Orania, which is more a heavenly love kind of thing. We'll get in more into that. And then Philomedes, which is laughter-loving or genial-loving. Her sanctuaries, there's a couple of note. As Aphrodite Pandemos, she has one in the Acropolis of Athens, which she splits with Pietho. There's a sanctuary called the Adonia, which we'll get into, that was a women-only festival about the death of Adonis. And if you don't know, Adonis is this lover of Aphrodite. She finds him as a baby and gives him to Persephone. And he grows up, and Persephone's like, oh, he's hot. And Aphrodite is also like, oh, he's hot. And so Zeus is like, okay, for 4 months he will spend the time with Aphrodite, for 4 months he will spend the time with Persephone, and for 4 months he'll spend the time with doing whatever he wants, and he spends that time with Aphrodite. It's a male lover of Aphrodite, pretty much. She also has one in Corinth, which is on their Acropolis, and it's filled with sacred female servants, which we'll get into later. This also applies to Dionysus, so I apologize for not saying this in the last video. But her popularity spikes in the 4th century. Philosophers in the 4th century kind of looked at all the gods and were like, they're kind of terrible people. Why is that the divine? And so because of that, a lot of the more human-oriented gods spike in popularity. So Aphrodite with love, and Dionysus with booze and partying. And then Asclepius, who is a son of Apollo, who dies and gets turned into a god. It's complicated. I'll make a separate video on him. He is the god of healing, and he becomes very important as well. There are actually 2 Aphrodites in mythology, technically. It's kind of the cult titles thing, but on an elevated level. So yes, there's one Aphrodite, but there's 2 of them. It's complicated. And her regard as Aphrodite, and it kind of with her being 2 people, it fixes the whole very different birth stories problem. So as Aphrodite or Aenea, She is the daughter of Ouranos. She has a small altar along the Pan-Athenaic Way in Athens, where we have found burnt bones, so there's definitely sacrifices made there. She's more of a heavenly, like, universal force kind of thing. Beyond the human realm, she's not sexual, she's not human love or attraction. She's very philosophical, and her, like, attraction is to knowledge, and the offspring of that attraction is more knowledge. So she's a massive nerd, apparently. She's not in a ton of myths. Of the two, Aphrodite Pandemos is more narrative driving, I guess. Which, speaking of, Aphrodite Pandemos is literally the people of Aphrodite. Aphrodite's of the people. She is the daughter of Zeus and Dione, and she has a cult in Athens, which I already mentioned, associated with Pietho. She's the one you think of. She's the human love and sexuality and attractiveness. She dresses up Pandora and then Theogony, and she gives Hera this girdle that she has that makes everybody fall in love with her in the Iliad. Hera wants to seduce Zeus, so the Achaeans start. So she's the one that's in most of the mythology that you've heard of. Aphrodite Urania and Aphrodite Pandemos are discussed at length in Plato's Symposium, which again, I recommend you read. It's very good. Along with Eros, which is a son of Aphrodite, and B, human form of human desire in general. As her son, he's more of an idea of, like, love being a consequence of beauty, but in the Hesiod theogony, he's a primordial force kind of thing. So, similar to Aphrodite, he has two different birth stories. One being really normal, and one being super weird. She's similar to Inanna and Ishtar and Astarte, which are all Babylonian gods. And Inanna and Ishtar are both extremely vengeful, just like Aphrodite is. And I will point that out in Eros and Psyche, because that's another one of my favorite myths. And all four of them, Ishtar, Inanna, Astarte, and Aphrodite, all use sacred prostitutes in their temples. She has a couple different homelands just because of the way her worship spread. Cythera, which is off of the coast of Sparta and, like, the Peloponnese. Cyprus, which is more in the Aegean Islands. Phoenicia, which is over by the Near East, like Israel area. She has a temple in Knidos, which is another Aegean island, kind of sort of close to Sparta and Cythera. And she's worshipped an entirely different idea altogether, which is Eupolia, which is, like, good sailing. So that's another connection to her ocean origins, and also, like, a connection to Poseidon, which is interesting. It's also one of the only circular temples ever found. So Aphrodite of Knidos is a statue made by this guy named Praxiteles, who was this really famous sculptor in the 4th century. It's the first depiction we have of a nude goddess, and there's a definite attention to sexuality in it. She also has an offspring that is interesting. That's saying something coming from mythology. His name is Priapus, and he's either fathered by Hermes, Zeus, or Dionysus. He was a symbol of prosperity and fertility, and he's more popular in ancient Rome as the son of Dionysus. He also has a huge penis, which is why he's a symbol of prosperity and fertility. But Romans painted him on the entryways to their houses, and the huge penis might have been apotropaic, meaning it drove away, like, bad, like, spirits and, like, bad luck kind of thing. It's kind of the same idea of, like, the evil eye. But he also, there's a pretty famous painting of him measuring his penis on a scale against a bag of coins, so he also brings fortune. It's just one of those things that, like, you gotta get used to. There's the myth of Pygmalion and Galatea, which is this idea of, like, a man creating his ideal woman, quote-unquote, for his needs. And Aphrodite, if you don't know the myth, Pygmalion is a sculptor, and he makes this, like, ultra-beautiful statue. And one of the days that Aphrodite's festival is going on, he goes and sacrifices to Aphrodite and says, "Hey, bring my statue to life." And he goes home, and the statue's alive, and they live happily ever after. And Galatea is the name of the statue. And if you subscribe to the idea of Aristotle, which no one should, Aristotle thought that women were deformed versions of men. So there's the philosopher kind of coming back into it. Aphrodite is also this granter of boons for people who want love, but don't have the means to get love kind of thing. Aphrodite's also there when love sucks, which again, the idea of, like, the granter of boons with the myth of Hippomedes and Atlanta. And so Atlanta doesn't want to get married, but her dad wants her to get married. And Atlanta, who's this, like, ultra, like, amazing warrior woman, I love her, is like, okay, I'll get married if somebody can beat me in a foot race. And if they can't beat me in a foot race, they die. You know, dozens of men try to beat her, and none of them do. And all of them die. Until Hippomenes comes down and he's like, okay, I want to marry this person. He goes to the temple of Aphrodite and says, okay, how do I do it? Aphrodite gives him 3 golden apples and says, okay, when you're racing her, chuck these as far as you can and keep going. So when the day of the race comes around, he chucks the first one, and Atlanta turns around, picks it up, and he plows ahead, and she catches up to him. Chucks another one, same thing happens, and then they're like neck and neck toward the finish line. He chucks the third one as far as he can, and then sprints across the finish line. Love sucks because he didn't have the ability to be around this person, and then Aphrodite gave him that way. Also, the Trojan War. She started the Trojan War. She's kind of just ditz in the Iliad, and I kind of hate her in the Iliad. But, yeah. So if you don't know the story of the Trojan War, long story short, so all the gods are at this wedding, and Eris, the goddess of discord, which is someone you understandably don't want at your wedding, is invited, and she gets really mad. And so she writes on a golden apple for the fairest on it and chucks it into the wedding reception. Eventually gets narrowed down to 3 goddesses that are Aphrodite, Athena, and Hera. And they go to this Trojan prince named Paris. You know, all 3 of them give him some sort of bribe. Hera says, oh, I'll make you the king of all of Asia and Europe. Athena says, oh, I'll give you great military strategy. And Aphrodite says, oh, I'll give you the most beautiful woman in the world. And if you know anything about Greek mythology, you know how that ends. So I read that as love sucking and causing, global wars. So if you're a mortal sleeping with a god, you're not supposed to sleep with gods because of the, power play kind of thing. And it will ruin your life. You'll get gifts, usually either, some sort of, leg up in the world. It's typically a child. Oh, but you're also punished in some way because of that power dynamic. So, Anchises, when he sleeps with Aphrodite, he gets Ares, but he's also crippled for the rest of his life. So I mentioned Adonis, and he has his own thing. He has a thing called the Adonia, which is a women-oriented festival at the expense of men. So it's kind of the idea of, yeah, you get kids through women, but who's really putting in more of the work? It's 9 months versus 10 minutes in the bedroom, and you don't have to deal with it anymore. And then the woman has to grow a child. So there would be flowers around for a couple days, or 8 days. Women would go out and laugh, and men, of course, are invited to it, and so they don't know what's going on. And nowadays, if you hear somebody saying something, you think it's about you, or you think it's about somebody you know. And so they definitely played on, the psychological aspect of it, which I find very funny. This also has the idea of, crops grow for months and months and months, but men only plow the field for a couple days. Who's actually making the food? The women and the slaves. There's one pot connected, the Adonia, which depicts a woman growing phalluses. So there's definitely a little bit of, role reversal on who's the, dominant idea of what a human is, gender-wise. And also, it definitely has something to do with, crops and stuff, which is not something you see a lot with Aphrodite. It also has to do with, men becoming incompetent eventually. Adonis is the son of Mira and Phosos, which is a father-daughter relationship. And the daughter, who I think is Mira, eventually turns into a tree, and Adonis just kind of pops out of the tree, and it's really weird. To the idea of, eventually becoming potent. So, they always shrivel up, and Adonis dies at the end of his myth, probably by a boar sent by Ares because he was jealous of Adonis and Aphrodite's relationship. And he's put on a bed of lettuce. Adonis, not Ares. Adonis is put on a bed of lettuce after he dies, which was thought to be, lettuce was thought to be a aphrodisiac at the time, and I've also been used for a symbol of Aphrodite, though it's not super common. But all of the times that a female goddess has had a male lover, it's ended bad for the male lover. Eos, and it was the goddess of dawn, and Tithonus. Essentially, Eos asks Zeus to give him immortal life, and Zeus does this, but he doesn't grant him eternal youth. And so he just keeps getting older and older and older and older, and eventually he turns into a grasshopper. And then Selene and Endymion. Endymion is the shepherd, and Selene, who's the goddess of the moon, falls in love with him and puts him into an eternal sleep. And Selene has 50 daughters with him, which, like, not cool, lady. And Adonis and Aphrodite, so again, it's all the men becoming incompetent and unneeded. Which is cool, because it's kind of like a feminist thing. It's not a feminist thing, because, like, men are needed and valid, but, like, it's nice to have, at some point in the Greco-Roman pantheon and Greco-Roman mythology, there's so much stuff that women get put through just to have, like, 3 myths that, like, nothing happens to the female character. It's nice. That is Aphrodite. She's, again, very complicated and interesting. She's kind of low on my list because I just kind of see her as, like, a petty person who, like, doesn't really care about consequences. See the Trojan War. And also one of my favorite myths is Eros and Psyche, and she is very much the villain of that story. So I am not insignificantly biased. Overly Sarcastic Productions also has a really good video on this. It's kind of in the same vein of Dionysus, where they go through her transition from Mycenaean to classical Greece, and that's really interesting. Yeah, and Red goes a little bit into Adonis more than I did, so I will link that in the description like I did last week. As always, if you have any myths you want me to talk about in particular, leave them down in the comments, and as always, we have the Instagram, which I'm going to try and start updating more, but that is all for this week. Have a good week.